There is a sperm whale with teeth bigger than a T-Rex's. It hunted other whales. It lived at the same time as the Megalodon, and it wasn't the prey. Before that claim lands properly, it needs a reference point. So start with something you already know. Tyrannosaurus Rex is the standard unit of prehistoric terror. When paleontologists want the public to grasp the scale of something dangerous, they reach for T-Rex. The teeth are part of why. Up to 60 of them in an adult, serrated, up to 30 centimeters in total length including the root, designed to crush bone and strip flesh from animals the size of a car. No other terrestrial predator in the fossil record comes close. That comparison has served popular science well for decades. The largest Livyatan tooth ever found measured 36.2 centimeters. That figure comes directly from Lambert et al. 2010, published in Nature, the paper that formally described the animal for science. The measurement refers to the total length, crown plus root, the same way you would measure a T-Rex tooth, 6 centimeters longer. Wider too, a maximum diameter of 12 centimeters compared to perhaps 3 or 4 for a large T-Rex tooth. Not a marginal difference. The difference between a boning knife and a machete. That is where we are going. The animal those teeth belong to, the ocean it lived in, the predator it competed with, and the quieter, stranger descendant it left behind. 10 million years ago, off the coast of what is now southern Peru, the Pacific Ocean was warmer than it's today, by several degrees at minimum, and extraordinarily productive. Cold water pushed up from the deep along the western edge of South America in an upwelling system that functioned as an ancient analogue of the modern Humboldt current. Nutrients drawn to the surface fed dense blooms of phytoplankton, which fed vast populations of small schooling fish, sardine relatives of the genus Sardinops, whose remains have been found preserved as fossilized stomach contents inside a juvenile shark recovered from the same formation. Those fish fed the baleen whales, and the baleen whales fed the things at the top. The geological record of this ecosystem is the Pisco Formation, exposed today in the Ica Desert of southern coastal Peru. Paleontologists describe it as one of the most outstanding Cenozoic marine fossil sites on Earth. A Lagerstätte, the technical term for a deposit of exceptional preservation quality. Thousands of marine vertebrate specimens have been excavated from its layers over more than a century of fieldwork. Cetaceans dominate the assemblage, mysticetes of several species, beaked whales of the genus Mesopicitus that have been found in concentrations of hundreds of individuals, dolphins and physeteroids, sperm whale relatives. Alongside them, seals, sea turtles, crocodiles, seabirds, bony fish, and sharks. The shark assemblage at one Cerro Colorado horizon alone includes at least 21 species, ranging from small carcharinids to the largest tooth-bearing predator in the history of the ocean. This was a world with real monsters in it. In November 2008, a researcher named Klaas Post, affiliated with the Natural History Museum Rotterdam, stumbled across one of them on the final day of a field expedition. At a site called Cerro Colorado, 35 kilometers south-southwest of the city of Ica, he found a skull partially protruding from the rock, approximately 3 meters long, nearly 2 meters wide, teeth still embedded in the jaw. The fossils were prepared at the Museo de Historia Natural of the Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos in Lima, where they remain today under catalogue number MUSM 1676. A team led by Olivier Lambert of the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences and Giovanni Bianucci of the University of Pisa, along with Post, and 4 co-authors including Peruvian researchers Rodolfo Salas Gismondi and Mario Urbina, described the animal formally in the journal Nature in July 2010. The original genus name, Livyatan, for the biblical sea monster, turned out to already belong to a mastodon genus described in 1841. The authors corrected this in an August 2010 erratum, changing the genus to Livyatan, the original Hebrew form of the word. The species name remained, melvillei, in honor of Herman Melville, who filled Moby Dick with sperm whales he called Leviathans. The name fits. What it described was worse than the legend. The holotype skull is 75% complete. It includes the rostrum with damaged maxillary teeth embedded in place, the right side of the cranium, the mandibles, the lower jaws, and 9 detached teeth along with additional tooth fragments. 11 deep alveoli, the tooth sockets, are preserved in the lower jaw, 9 in the upper. None of the back teeth were well preserved, and none of the teeth of the holotype were complete. The largest teeth, the second and third teeth on the left lower jaw, were calculated to be approximately 36.2 centimeters in total length. The smallest preserved tooth, one of the front lower teeth, measured around 11.5 centimeters. An entire dentition of functional, enamel-coated, deeply rooted teeth, larger than the scientific record holds for any T-Rex ever excavated. Lambert and his colleagues made that comparison explicit in the Nature paper itself. They described the specimen as representing, to their knowledge, one of the largest bites for vertebrates and certainly the biggest bite for tetrapods. That isn't a popularization, that is the conclusion of the researchers who held the skull and measured the teeth, published in one of the most rigorously reviewed scientific journals on the planet. Tetrapods. The word carries the weight of the claim. It means 4-limbed vertebrates and all their evolutionary descendants, amphibians, reptiles including all the dinosaurs, birds, and mammals. Every animal that ever walked on land or evolved from something that did. The category is enormous. It includes every theropod dinosaur, every crocodile, every mosasaur, every prehistoric mammal. It does not include sharks. Sharks are cartilaginous fish, chondrichthyans, a separate vertebrate lineage that diverged from the tetrapod line hundreds of millions of years earlier. Megalodon's teeth could reach roughly 16 to 20 centimeters in height. Extraordinary objects, found in sediments on every continent, immediately recognizable and genuinely huge. But they belong to a different comparison. For the tetrapod record, every dinosaur, every prehistoric land predator, every whale that came before, the Livyatan tooth at 36.2 centimeters stands alone. A 2025 study by Kristin Watmore and Donald Prothero, analyzing a comparable giant physeteroid tooth from Orange County, California, described Livyatan's teeth as the largest non-tusk teeth known in any mammal. Excluding tusks, the elongated teeth used for display, digging, or combat rather than killing, no mammal ever developed a functional biting tooth longer. That includes every predatory whale, every large cat lineage, every bear, every extinct macro-predatory mammal in the Cenozoic fossil record. 36.2 centimeters, enamel-coated, deeply embedded in the bone, worn from use. The skull tells you what the animal was doing with those teeth. Modern sperm whales have teeth. This isn't common knowledge, but it matters for what comes next. Physeter macrocephalus has 18 to 28 pairs of conical teeth in its lower jaw, each reasonably large. The upper jaw teeth are vestigial, reduced to vestigial buds embedded in the gum tissue, rarely erupting through the surface, functionally useless for catching prey. Noah's fisheries documentation is straightforward on this. The teeth in the upper jaw rarely break through the gums. The lower teeth appear mainly in the context of social interactions between males. Scarring patterns on the heads of male sperm whales suggest they use their lower jaws in combat with each other. For catching food, the modern sperm whale does not bite. It dives to depths between 1,000 and 3,000 meters, locates squid in near total darkness using its echolocation system, and draws them into its long, narrow mouth through suction. The jaw is built for this, elongated, relatively narrow, designed to create the negative pressure needed to pull in soft-bodied cephalopods without biting them. Livyatan's skull looks nothing like that. Lambert described a jaw architecture designed for a fundamentally different purpose. Short, wide rostrum, not long and narrow for suction, but abbreviated and robust to better resist the lateral forces of struggling prey. Enormous temporal fossa, the cavity on the skull where the jaw-closing muscles attach, much longer antero-posteriorly than the orbit area of the skull, in Lambert's description, differing dramatically from the comparatively small temporal fossa of Physeter. The wide space between the zygomatic process and the medial surface of the temporal fossa indicated a large volume of musculus temporalis, the primary jaw-closing muscle. Every architectural feature pointed in the same direction. Functional teeth in both upper and lower jaws. Deep, vertical wear facets on the tooth surfaces from repeated tooth-to-tooth contact. The physical evidence that those upper and lower teeth sheared past each other under load, again and again, throughout the animal's life. Roots so large that the lower jaw had to be deep and wide specifically to accommodate them. Anterior teeth projecting forward at roughly 45 degrees, adapted for grasping large, three-dimensional prey rather than for precision biting. Lambert's 2010 paper describes the bite in functional terms. This sperm whale could firmly hold large prey with its interlocking teeth, inflict deep wounds and tear large pieces from the body of the victim, as performed on a smaller scale by the delphinid Orcinus, the killer whale. The comparison to Orcinus is deliberate. Killer whales, with bodies under 9 meters and skulls roughly a meter long, have been documented cooperatively attacking and killing baleen whales considerably larger than themselves. Livyatan had a skull 3 times the length of a killer whale's. The analogy gives you the hunting style. The scale difference gives you the consequence. Lambert proposed that Livyatan fed predominantly on medium-sized baleen whales, mysticetes, specifically the cetotheriid species abundant at Cerro Colorado, with bodies approaching 10 meters in length. These animals had the right combination of size and fat content to sustain a predator with the caloric demands of a warm-blooded 13 to 17-meter body. More than 20 near-complete cetotheriid skeletons had been mapped at the site. The prey was there. The predator was built for it. No confirmed Livyatan bite marks on a specific named mysticete fossil have been published. Predation is inferred from anatomy and ecosystem context, not from identified tooth traces on a specific victim. The inference is robust. The anatomy of the predator, the abundance of appropriate prey in the same formation, and the functional morphology of the jaw all point to the same conclusion. In Olivier Lambert's own words from a 2010 interview with National Geographic, while modern sperm whales mainly eat squid, Lambert thought that Livyatan used its teeth to kill the giant baleen whales. Livyatan wasn't the only animal doing this in the Miocene Pacific. It had competition. The Pisco Formation at Cerro Colorado has yielded isolated Megalodon teeth throughout the same stratigraphic interval that produced the Livyatan holotype. Both animals appear in the same formation, the same region, and the same temporal window. The Livyatan holotype dates to approximately 9.9 to 8.9 million years ago, the Tortonian stage of the late Miocene. Megalodon, with a confirmed range of roughly 23 to 3.6 million years ago, was broadly present in Miocene marine deposits worldwide, including, documented in the fossil assemblage, at Cerro Colorado. A 2022 ecological analysis of the Pisco Formation characterized the ecosystem as one dominated by extremely large-bodied apex predators like Livyatan melvillei and Carcharocles megalodon. The top predators specifically identified at Cerro Colorado were 3: Livyatan, Megalodon, and the large lamniform shark Cosmopolitodus hastalis, a relative of the modern shortfin mako. Lambert's 2010 Nature paper addressed the coexistence directly. Together with the contemporaneous giant shark Carcharocles megalodon, Livyatan probably had a profound impact on the structuring of Miocene marine communities. Precision matters here. No single baleen whale specimen has been found with confirmed bite marks from both Livyatan and Megalodon on the same individual skeleton. What the fossil record does show is this: shark bite marks on baleen whale bones from the Pisco Formation documented in peer-reviewed study. Shark bite marks on the Livyatan holotype skull itself, specifically 3 Type 2 incisions documented in a 2022 study by Benitez Palomino and colleagues, located deep in the temporal fossa and interpreted as scavenging events by large sharks on the Livyatan carcass after death. Sharks ate Livyatan's carcasses. Both Livyatan and Megalodon ate baleen whales. Whether they ever directly confronted one another over prey or territory can't be confirmed from existing fossils. What can be confirmed is that they occupied the same water, hunted the same prey pool, and belonged to the same apex tier. That isn't a hypothetical. It's the stratigraphic and trophic record of the Pisco Formation. The Megalodon wasn't the unchallenged sovereign of the Miocene ocean. Something else had functional teeth in both jaws and was hunting the same target from a different angle. The Megalodon was the apex shark. Livyatan was the apex whale. For several million years, both definitions were simultaneously true in the same ocean. The size question is the one that generates the most friction in popular accounts of these two animals, and it deserves to be handled carefully. Megalodon size estimates, which have been revised multiple times, cluster around 15 to 18 meters for well-documented individuals, with upper bounds reaching roughly 20 meters. Livyatan's body length is estimated from the skull alone. No postcranial skeleton has been found. Lambert and his team in 2010 calculated a range of 13.5 to 17.5 meters using 2 reference points. Scaling against modern Physeter macrocephalus yielded 13.5 meters. Scaling against the Miocene physeteroid Zygophyseter varolei yielded 16.2 to 17.5 meters, with the range reflecting incompleteness in the Zygophyseter type specimen. Some subsequent literature cites 18 meters. The honest range supported by the primary literature is 13 to 17 meters, with upper estimates potentially extending further. A mass estimate of roughly 57 tons has appeared in subsequent literature derived by applying sperm whale mass-to-length ratios to estimated body dimensions. The Lambert 2010 paper does not state a specific mass figure. At the conservative estimate, Livyatan was somewhat smaller than a large Megalodon individual. At the upper estimate, they were broadly comparable in length. But raw body length isn't the whole story of what made Livyatan dangerous. It was warm-blooded, an endotherm, capable of sustaining high metabolic activity and potentially higher sustained speeds than a shark of similar mass. Its jaw was anatomically specialized for gripping and tearing through warm-blooded prey in ways that Megalodon's laterally compressed serrated teeth weren't. Megalodon's teeth were optimized for cutting. Livyatan's were optimized for holding, shearing, and dismembering at close range. These are different weapons designed for different prey strategies. Both were capable of killing baleen whales. Neither was safe from the other. Whether that ever mattered directly, whether an adult Livyatan and an adult Megalodon ever competed over a kill or confronted one another, the fossil record can't tell us. The ecosystem record tells us they shared the same water for millions of years and both thrived. That is, in its own way, more remarkable than any hypothetical conflict. The jaw mechanics bring up a second dimension to Livyatan that deserves its own space. The Lambert 2010 paper describes the jaw in the language of biomechanics as well as anatomy. The temporal fossa, the jaw muscle attachment space, was enormous relative to the rest of the skull, considerably larger than in Physeter, and explicitly noted as capable of accommodating a large volume of musculus temporalis. No formal finite element analysis exists for Livyatan in published literature. A ResearchGate listing from August 2025 suggests such a study may now exist from researcher Dane Anders, but the figures aren't available in sources reviewed for this script. What is available is the formal biomechanical analysis of Zygophyseter varolei, a smaller macroraptorial physeteroid from the upper Miocene of southern Italy, with a skull approximately 148 centimeters long and a total body length of roughly 6.5 to 7 meters. A 2021 study by Giovanni Bianucci and colleagues using finite element analysis, the same computational modeling technique used to estimate T-Rex bite forces, found that Zygophyseter exerted an anterior bite force of more than 4,000 newtons and a posterior bite force of more than 10,000 newtons. This was described as in good agreement with several osteomorphological and dental characters supporting a predatory feeding strategy on medium-sized marine vertebrates. The study explicitly noted that other macroraptorial sperm whales, including the giant putative whale-eater Livyatan melvillei, remained targets for similar analysis. Livyatan's skull was roughly double the length of Zygophyseter's. Bite force scales non-linearly with skull dimensions, not double for double the length, but considerably more. The temporal fossa proportions described by Lambert are substantially larger relative to skull size than those in Zygophyseter. Lambert's team stated plainly in their paper that the anatomy represented one of the largest bites for vertebrates and certainly the biggest bite for tetrapods. That conclusion comes from the researchers who measured the specimen, not from scaling calculations done afterward. What Bianucci's Zygophyseter analysis gives us is a lower bound for the macroraptorial physeteroid bite. More than 10,000 newtons of posterior force in a 7-meter animal. The animal that generated that figure was considerably smaller than Livyatan in every relevant dimension. The intelligence question is harder to pin down precisely, but it isn't as speculative as it might appear. No endocast of Livyatan's brain exists. The neurocranial region of the holotype skull isn't sufficiently preserved to extract an endocranial volume. No peer-reviewed paper has published a brain size estimate for Livyatan melvillei. Any specific figure needs to be set against the actual numbers. The modern sperm whale's brain, the brain of Physeter macrocephalus, Livyatan's closest living relative in the broadest sense, weighs approximately 7 to 9 kilograms. Some measurements reach 9.2 kilograms. The largest brain ever recorded in any animal belongs to either the sperm whale or the killer whale, depending on the study. Both have been recorded above 9 kilograms. A T-Rex brain, reconstructed from endocasts using CT imaging of multiple specimens, is estimated at approximately 350 to 400 grams. The ratio is more than 20 to 1. Livyatan wasn't Physeter. It was a stem physeteroid, an earlier macroraptorial branch of the same family, not a direct ancestor of the modern sperm whale. Whether its brain was proportionally closer to a modern Physeter or somewhat smaller isn't determinable from existing evidence. What is determinable is this: it came from a lineage that was already building something extraordinary in neural architecture, and the large supracranial basin on the skull, which Lambert's team interpreted as analogous to the spermaceti organ structure in modern Physeter, indicates that the acoustic and cognitive infrastructure of the cetacean brain was already present. The spermaceti organ in modern sperm whales is associated with echolocation, sound production at extraordinary volumes, and possibly acoustic stunning of prey. Livyatan had the anatomical precondition for a version of that system. The monster had teeth that exceeded a T-Rex's. It also came from the family that eventually produced the animal with the largest brain that has ever existed. Both facts are true, and neither cancels the other. The California tooth extends the geography of this predator well beyond Peru. In 2025, Watmore and Prothero published the description of a giant physeteroid tooth recovered from Mission Viejo in Orange County, California, from deposits most likely belonging to the Capistrano Formation, dating to approximately 5 to 6 million years ago. The tooth measured at least 250 millimeters in its incomplete state, with cementum and dentin thickness falling within the known range for Livyatan melvillei teeth. The authors identified it as CF Livyatan, comparable to Livyatan, possibly Livyatan itself, and described it as the first evidence that giant macroraptorial physeteroids weren't restricted to the southern hemisphere. The paper explicitly states, largest Livyatan teeth measure about 360 millimeters in total length, citing Lambert et al.'s measurement as the reference. That California tooth is younger than the Peruvian holotype by several million years. The species, or a close relative, persisted into the Pliocene on the Pacific coast of North America. Comparable teeth from South Africa's Namaqualand coast, from Chile, and from Argentina all point toward a family of giant-toothed whale predators with a distribution spanning the Pacific, the Southern Ocean, and the South Atlantic, present from at least the Middle Miocene through the early Pliocene. This wasn't a regional predator. It, or its close relatives, patrolled every major ocean system during the period when global marine productivity was at or near its Cenozoic peak. The late Miocene cooling ended that world. Starting approximately 10 million years ago and persisting through roughly 7 million years ago, global ocean temperatures entered a sustained decline, documented in deep-water isotope records from sediment cores around the world. The Miocene climatic optimum, the warm peak that had sustained elevated temperatures across the world's seas during the Middle Miocene, was over. Two of the three major seaways connecting the tropical oceans were closing due to tectonic uplift, disrupting the circulation patterns that had driven the extraordinary productivity of upwelling systems like the one that sustained the Pisco ecosystem. For the baleen whale populations that Livyatan depended on, the dense assemblages of 10-meter cetotheriids that populated warm Miocene seas, the cooling meant altered prey, altered migration, and declining population density. A world that had sustained two giant apex predators simultaneously could no longer support both. Lambert and this team noted in the 2010 paper that the specialized ecology emerging in the lineage of Physeter allowed members of that lineage to survive the late Neogene physical and faunal changes, cooling following the mid-Miocene climatic optimum, co-occurring with the extinction of all raptorial sperm whales. All of them. Every macroraptorial physeteroid, Livyatan, Rigmophyseter, Zygophyseter, Acrophyseter, disappears from the global fossil record by the late Miocene or earliest Pliocene. The last known Livyatan fossil dates to approximately 9 to 10 million years ago. That is a last appearance datum from the single well-constrained specimen we have, not a precisely dated extinction event. More specimens could extend the range. But the pattern is consistent. The lineage of giant whale hunters dies out as the Miocene productivity collapses. What survived was the line that switched diets. The ancestors of Physeter macrocephalus abandoned raptorial predation. They lost, or rather failed to maintain, the functional upper dentition that made Livyatan's bite possible. Their lower jaws elongated and narrowed. Their prey shifted from warm-blooded baleen whales to squid, which exist at depth in quantities large enough to sustain very large animals, regardless of surface ocean productivity. By feeding 1,000 to 3,000 meters down in a cold, dark environment where surface temperature changes have diminished effect, the Physeter lineage insulated itself from the ecological collapse that erased its macroraptorial cousins. The cooling ocean that destroyed Livyatan's food web simply didn't penetrate to the depths where Physeter was hunting. Megalodon outlasted Livyatan by 5 to 6 million years, persisting until approximately 3.6 million years ago, before its own prey base contracted and competition from emerging great white sharks and early killer whale ancestors became a terminal pressure. But that is Megalodon's story to close. Livyatan's story closes earlier, around 9 or 10 million years ago, when the warm, whale-rich seas of the Pisco ecosystem thinned and cooled, and the animal built to dominate them had nothing left to hunt. It didn't lose a fight. Its food disappeared. The modern sperm whale is what came out the other side. Physeter macrocephalus isn't a close relative of Livyatan in the technical phylogenetic sense. Livyatan belongs to the stem Physeteroids, the macroraptorial branch that diverged early from the main line and eventually died out. Physeter sits in the crown group, the lineage that persisted and produced the living animal. They share a common ancestor somewhere deep in the Physeteroid family tree, but they're not parent and child, more like great-uncle and distant nephew, separated by the branch point between macroraptorial and suction-feeding strategies. The same family, different trajectories. The traits that carry over are real and striking. The spermaceti organ, the massive fatty structure in the forehead, Responsible for the most powerful biological sound ever recorded is a physeteroid innovation that Livyatan skull already shows evidence of in its enlarged supracranial basin. The capacity for deep diving is built into the physeteroid body plan at a level that precedes the split between the macroraptorial and suction-feeding lines. The social complexity and acoustic sophistication of modern sperm whale pods, their dialects, their cooperative behavior, their multi-generational clan structures, are features of a brain architecture that was already being built in Livyatan's family long before the ecological pressure that produced today's animal. The modern sperm whale has a brain that outweighs a T-Rex's by more than 20 times. It dives deeper than any other mammal, documented at over 3,000 meters. It produces a sound louder than any other living creature. Male physeter reach 16 to 18 meters, with some recorded individuals exceeding 20 meters. By any measurement applied to living animals, the modern sperm whale is one of the most extreme creatures on Earth. All of that, every extreme, was forged in a lineage that once also produced Livyatan melvillei. The echolocation was there, the large body was there, the deep diving architecture was there, the brain infrastructure was there. What wasn't there, what physeter had to give up to survive the late Miocene, was the upper teeth, the wide raptorial jaw, the diet of other whales. The modern sperm whale is what the sperm whale lineage looks like after the macroraptorial experiment ended and only the survivors were left to pass on their genes. Every feature that makes physeter extreme today is a feature that existed in some ancestral or parallel form in a family that once also contained a 3-meter skull and a mouth full of 36-centimeter teeth, and the anatomy to use them on animals the size of a humpback whale. The version you know is the version that changed. The version that didn't change, the version that stayed committed to being the most dangerous mammalian predator the ocean has ever produced, is the version that ran out of ocean. This is what we have from a single partial skull found in a Peruvian desert in November 2008. That is the scope of the physical evidence. One skull preserved to 75%, with teeth but no body. Every body length estimate, every mass figure, every behavioral inference beyond the jaw anatomy visible in the holotype comes from scaling and comparison and careful reasoning from what remains. That caveat matters. It's also not a reason to be unimpressed. The teeth are 36.2 centimeters long. That is a measurement from the fossil itself, confirmed in the primary literature, confirmed in subsequent analyses. The jaw is designed for gripping and shearing warm-blooded prey. That is what Lambert and his colleagues concluded from the anatomy they described. The animal shared its ecosystem with Megalodon. That is what the Pisco Formation fossil assemblage shows. Both predators hunted baleen whales in the same waters. That is the ecological logic of the site. Livyatan melvillei was a physeteroid, a member of the family that eventually produced the largest brain in the history of life on Earth. It belonged to a lineage that the late Miocene cooling extinguished, while the suction-feeding branch of the same family survived by going deep and eating squid. The largest toothed predator that ever lived wasn't a shark. It was a whale, and what replaced it still swimming. If you want more stories like this, subscribe.